This video is brought to you by patreon.com/worsttake. Get access to exclusive live streams and Discord servers, on-screen shoutouts, and early access to some videos when you join now. Help make sure that we can continue to make content like this by supporting the Patreon. Links are in the description down below.
See, we all get excited about free agency and who the unrestricted free agents are going to be and who are these guys that are going to get all this money, and your team's probably not going to get them. There's probably like 2 teams that can get one of the top 3 guys in free agency, and we all get excited about those guys. But then there's another list of guys that I think it's interesting to have a conversation about, the guys who fit this description on your own team. It's also an interesting conversation to have about guys who fit this description on other teams, because they could become your biggest free agents, and that's cap casualties. And if you don't believe that cap casualties, even if they're not on your team, can make a big difference, I only have to point to one person on the Cleveland Browns offense, Amari Cooper, who was a big deal for the Browns the last few years, I would say. And the Browns only got him because he was a cap casualty out there in Dallas. Now, that's what we're going to talk about. We're going to talk about cap casualty, who on the Browns roster isn't a cap casualty, who on the Browns roster might be a cap casualty, and who the Browns might have to get creative about when it comes to keeping them. Let's start with the Browns roster. Now, there are 2 names that come up as potential cap casualties for the last few years: Nick Chubb and Amari Cooper. I'm here to tell you, they're not going anywhere, especially Nick Chubb. I'm pretty sure Amari Cooper is not going anywhere. I mean, he seems pretty indispensable at this point, so they will figure something out. Now, how will the Browns get around the cap number of Nick Chubb? They might try to extend him. They might try to move his money. They might just do nothing and let him play out the last year of his deal. And the same thing might happen with Amari Cooper. But what they do or don't do with that Amari Cooper contract and that Nick Chubb contract will tell you how big of a spender the Browns plan on being this free agency. And I think they are going to try to spend a bit of money this free agency, because they seem to be all in. They seem to think they're pretty close to having a championship quality roster. They just need some things to go their way and to tighten the screws in some areas. So I do think the Browns are going to be big players. Expect Nick Chubb to be back. Expect Amari Cooper to be back. But how they are back will be something that's interesting to watch. Dustin Hopkins is also on a lot of Browns cap casualty lists. Yeah, they're probably not going to do that. I don't see the Browns thinking it's wise to get rid of a kicker. I would be surprised, honestly, if they got on from Dustin. It wouldn't make that much sense. I don't think he would save that much money. It wouldn't be worth the hassle. 2 guys that might be cap casualties are Jordan Akins, tight end. Deshaun Watson wanted him, kind of underperformed this year. Maybe with the changes to the offense, they feel like they can go with Jordan Akins again, but it might not be worth it to them. Maybe they feel like they can get somebody in the draft that could be a little bit more active than him. And Jack Conklin. Now, Jack Conklin has a lot of guaranteed money. You have to get creative with how you get rid of Jack Conklin. You probably have to do it in a trade, a situation like how we got Amari Cooper, where you trade a player for less than their value so you can get somebody to eat the cap number. He's still an all-pro level player. I think there'll be interest for him in the trade market, despite the fact that he's been injured a lot recently. But I think a team would be willing to take a 5th or 6th round flyer on him and be willing to eat that money if they have that money to burn to potentially protect the quarterback that they want to protect and keep upright, since a lot of young quarterbacks are probably going to get drafted this year and probably have to start early on. So those are the Browns in this conversation. And it's not really that interesting of a conversation. It's not that controversial of an idea that the Browns are going to probably keep Nick Chubb and Amari Cooper and Dustin Hopkins. It's not controversial to say that the Browns are going to try to move on from Jack Conklin and try to move on potentially from Jordan Akins. None of that stuff is controversial. But some of the stuff that is interesting is not when you look at the Browns roster and who might be a cap casualty on the Browns roster. No. What starts to look interesting when we're talking about cap casualties is other people's rosters. Because I think that there's going to be one thing that the Browns are going to be looking for in free agency. Not just one thing, but one thing for sure. They're going to look for wide receivers who have experience with Deshaun Watson. They're going to want to bring some instant chemistry with Deshaun Watson into this room. And if I look around the cap casualty list, I see 3 names to me that look like they will be available because they might be cap casualties. And those 3 names happen to have experience with Deshaun Watson. Now, who's the first name? Brandon Cooks had experience with Deshaun Watson in 2020 with the Houston Texans. Deshaun Watson played very well with him. Think of Brandon Cooks as Marquise Goodwin, a little bit slower, but can catch. Right. And I think that was the big problem with Marquise Goodwin, is that he couldn't finish through contact. He couldn't catch through contact. And I think in order to be a useful wide receiver for Deshaun Watson, you do have to be able to catch through contact. While Brandon Cooks is not a big guy, he does play through contact well. He does run good routes. He will be a nice speed option that the Browns can have. And he's excellent with the ball in his hand. He makes way too much money for the Dallas Cowboys right now. He is a candidate to be a cap casualty, and he's somebody that I think the Browns would be interested in simply because the Browns have been interested in Brandon Cooks pretty much throughout every regime in his career. Like the Browns wanted to draft Brandon Cooks in 2014, but he didn't fall into their range that they liked him in. And then, several GMs have wanted to make goals at Brandon Cooks, and even Andrew Berry has tried to get Brandon Cooks before. So Brandon Cooks, definitely on the list. There was a lot of noise about it last year. I would think that there's going to be a lot of noise about it this year. He's somebody that the Browns might be interested in. Checks all the boxes for Andrew Berry, checks all the boxes for Deshaun Watson, has experience with both guys, and does stuff that both guys like. I think Brandon Cooks is somebody that they're going to look at that might be a cap casualty. The other one that I think it will be a cap casualty, the fit is a little bit more awkward than anybody else on this list. Hunter Renfrow. He is scheduled to become a cap casualty because there's a regime change coming. There's a regime change that's happened with the Raiders. He wasn't very productive last year. Now, if you know Hunter Renfrow, he had a pretty good first few years in the NFL. This year was a bit of a down year for Hunter, but we all know him from his time at Clemson. Caught the game-winning touchdown pass in Deshaun Watson's national championship victory. Hunter Renfrow has the experience with Deshaun Watson, veteran wide receiver, somebody you can plug in, play right now. And he's somebody who does give you a couple of goal line options. Not traditionally, right? He's not the big goal line option that like a bigger receiver would be, but he is somebody who you can fit in there, can give you electric coverage. I mean, not electric coverage, but electric routes that can get open in small spaces. And you know that him and Deshaun Watson have chemistry working in that area to be able to make it work. So again, another guy who has experience with Deshaun Watson who might be available. And then there's a third guy on this list. It's probably the guy you've heard all year. You heard the most about, Mike Williams. I think this is the guy that they end up probably going after. I know a lot of people might not be thrilled about that, but I don't think Mike Williams is here to be your number one option. I think Mike Williams is here to be a complement to Elijah Moore and Amari Cooper. And I think if that's the case, that's perfect for him. And I think he'll be successful in it. Mike Williams, another guy who used to play at Clemson with Deshaun Watson, has that instant chemistry with him, was on that national championship team. And this gives you something that you don't have, a true end zone threat and big play threat at the wide receiver position. We wanted that to be Elijah Moore. We didn't get that all the time from him, but you know that Mike Williams is a time-tested, proven big play threat in the NFL. If you need to know, go ahead and look at his tape against the Cleveland Browns a couple years ago, and it'll show you everything you need to know about Mike Williams being a big play threat. He's also a big body, right? Not only can he get open down the field, he's a huge body. Now, the questions about him are injury concerns. He's had a couple of ACL injuries. He's been hurt a lot. He's coming off of an ACL injury this year. It's rough for him from the injury picture, which means you might be able to get him on a discount. I think he's somebody worth looking at. He has the size that I think this wide receiver room needs. He has that 50-50 ball ability that I think this room needs. He has the big play ability that I think this room needs. He's an instant fit with Deshaun Watson. He's an instant fit in a downfield go type scheme where you've seen guys like Stephon Diggs shine or guys like Gabe Davis shine at times. I think you can easily plug Mike Williams into one of those roles and really see him shine. He checks all the boxes for me. If I had to pick one of these 3 receivers for the Browns to add, and injury was not a factor, Mike Williams would hands down be the guy that I go after. but injury is a factor. That's something that they're going to have to weigh, how much they care about, and is it worth the price, and is it worth it relying on somebody who has had this history with injury when you're already relying on a quarterback that you're not 100% sure can keep himself uninjured for the rest of the year as well. So that's going to be a concern, Mike Williams. But I think on paper, that's probably the guy that makes the most sense to go after that will also be a cap casualty. Now I got a couple of other guys that aren't necessarily Deshaun Watson related that I do think will be good cap casualties for the Browns to look at. Well, actually, I don't think this guy will be a good cap casualty. That's Khalil Mack. It's a big name. I think people will be excited if the Browns got him. And look, if the Chargers got off of him, people be excited, want the Browns to go after him. It would get everybody excited if you had Khalil Mack opposite of Myles Garrett. But I think Khalil Mack's sack numbers this year were a little inflated. I don't think they were true production, like pressure-based sack numbers. I think he had a very low number of pressures and a very high number of sacks, which is always a red flag when it comes to older pass rushers. And I think Khalil Mack's not at the point to where he's going to accept the secondary role. And you need a veteran who's going to accept the secondary role because you don't want another Jadeveon Clowney situation to happen where, you know, he gets disgruntled because people are calling him Robin or something like that, right? Like, I don't think Khalil Mack's at that point in his career. Don't blame him for not being at that point. He's coming off a 15-sack season. So, you know, I think that's probably going to be a no from the Cleveland Browns, but it will be something that we're interested in if it hits, that they're going to let go of Khalil Mack. Jonnu Smith is also another one to look at. The Browns need another tight end, and boy, do I think Jonnu Smith will be a great fit there for the Cleveland Browns. Look, there's not a lot of teams that could defend two good receiving tight ends well. If you can run the ball out of 12 with Nick Chubb and then throw the ball out of 12 with two tight ends that you feel great about, then I think that's the way to go. And I think that'll make the Browns very multiple, very deadly, and very interesting going forward. But that's the guys that I think might be cap casualties around the league that might end up on the Browns, or the Browns that are Browns right now that might end up on other teams because they might be cap casualties. Let me know what you think in the comment section down below. Y'all have a great day. Have an even better night. Peace.